How you doing, folks? My name's Jesse. Vlog entry number 5, October 15th. What have I been working on? Well, I've been working on the bass. My buddy Rob called me last week and he needed someone to fill in for his bass player at a car show gig this Friday. And Rob's been a friend of mine for years, and I said absolutely. Rob plays a classic rock band, classic country band, George Jones, Van Morrison, The Outlaws, from all the way up to like Chris Isaac, you know, the 90s kind of stuff. So it's going to be a lot of like a lot of stupid bass, and I'm here for it. I am here for the stupid bass. It's a Kalamazoo KB-1. It has an interesting story to it. It's come into my life fairly recently, but I've known about it for a long time. In the 90s, when I was getting into my teaching career, my cousin was also getting into his career, and we would hang out together a lot. He played cello in college, and he wanted to learn how to play bass. He thought it'd be the transition would be really good, and I was in full support of that because any family member playing music is cool with me. So we got together, we would jam together, we'd jam together with a drummer and another guitar player, and I would have my eye out for things that he might like or things that might be cool for him to have. And I came upon this at a local luthier who sold instruments on the side. This for $140 and Gibson Melody Maker that had been completely brutalized. There's nothing of it but a husk for $150. And I called my cousin and I was like, dude, it's a Gibson bass. Sort of. You know, it's got that Mudbucker pickup in it. Might as well be an EBO, right? Not exactly. So anyway, he bought it in the mid-90s, and it's in really clean condition, and I think it's in really clean condition because he never cottoned to it. He has a Yamaha fretless bass. He liked fretless because he didn't like frets. He felt like the transition from cello to fretless was easier. And he also has a Washburn acoustic electric bass. Fast forward to last year, and my wife and I are having dinner with him and his wife at his house, and he goes, I'm trying to downsize and clear out some stuff. You want the Kalamazoo? Yeah, please. Absolutely. Thanks. I appreciate it. So I got a drop-in bridge. I forget who makes the bridge, but it's intonatable, which is helpful. And I put some flat wound strings on it. And that's it. These knobs I put on for him back in the 90s because when we bought it, it didn't have knobs. And good luck finding knobs, original knobs for it. As a guitar player first who plays bass, I will be the first to say, I don't know how to play bass. I know about the notes, I know about the 1, I know about the 4, I know about the 5, I know about the 2, I know about the 6, I know all that. But that doesn't necessarily translate into knowing how to play the bass. You know, when I started writing and recording my own stuff, I bought a really cheap bass. I think it was a Tisco, a Hike Deluxe bass. And I'd start writing parts. And it didn't take me long to figure out the first thing I was doing wrong is I was playing about 75% more notes than I should because I was playing it like a guitar player. I was playing it too many notes. because you could hear it, and it's just like that bass line sounds too busy. And then the other thing I learned was that you're not necessarily being governed by what the guitar is playing. You're governed by what the drummer is playing. So that means you might not be playing the same kind of thing that the guitar player is playing, and you might not be playing the same at the same time. So good lessons to learn. Doesn't mean I've mastered the instrument at all, but I can play all day long, not a problem. This bass is interesting in that if you've never played a Kalamazoo KB-1, I'm not going to blow smoke. It's a cheap starter bass. It is. It's made out of masonite, which is perfectly functional, but no one's going to confuse it for mahogany. It's got the skinniest neck on it I've ever felt. Skinnier than any Tisco bass. Way skinnier than a Fender bass. It's short scale. It's skinnier than the guitar version of this, and I'll tell you about that someday. It's interesting to watch how the value of this seems to be changing on the market. You can probably get a Kalamazoo, either guitar or bass. Like Guitar Center is probably the best place to get a realistic price, and they're going about $500. On Reverb, they were going for $500 for a while, and now they're up in the $700 to $800 range, which I think is kind of ridiculous. It's not a $700 or $800 bass. It's not even really a $500 bass as far as I'm concerned. For $700, I could buy a much better bass that didn't have the same provenance. Because really that's what you're buying here is the provenance. It was made in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Well, forget about the fact that it wasn't necessarily made at the Parsons Street plant. Right? It was made in the garage out back. And I don't blame them. Like, I'm not going to talk smack about Gibson for it. The year was 1964, 1965. The Beatles dropped a cultural nuke on America, and every teenager and preteen was clamoring for an instrument. And by the way, there were a bunch of them there because the baby boom was in full swing. Right? So Gibson was just trying to fill a need. And in order to fill that need, they had to cut corners. Corners were cut. A lot. And it makes me think about the value. Like, how do we come to a conclusion about the value of an instrument? I think about that because I think about when I was in high school in the mid-'80s, we had a driver's ed teacher, Wayne Margolot. Mr. Margolot found out I played guitar and talked to me for a while. Apparently he was in California in the late 60s, early 70s in college. He claims he knew Glenn Frey. But one of the things he talked about was that back then people thought Fender guitars were cheap, that they were cheaply constructed and they didn't have the same value as a Gibson. And so there were certain circles in the 70s that would look down their nose at somebody who was playing a Fender. How true that is, I don't know. I wasn't playing guitar then. But it's something to think about when you look at it strictly from a construction standpoint, right? It's a lot cheaper to make a Telecaster than it is to make a Les Paul. So I think about value, and it makes me think of that story, and I'm going to butcher it, and I'm going to try and abbreviate it because it's kind of long. The story of the old Indian man, and he was a Plains Indian, and he was a widower, and he lived with his teenage son, and all they had was a teepee and a horse, right? And everyone talked about how poor his luck was because this was how he ended up. And when he heard that, he would just say, "Is that so?" And then the horse ran away, and everybody said, "Ah, worse luck." And he said, "Is that so?" And then the next day, the horse came back and brought a bunch of wild horses with him. So the old man went from being a pauper to being a rich man because he had all these horses that he could sell if he could tame them. And everybody was like, "Oh, what great luck you have." And he said, "Is that so?" Well, his teenage son broke his arm trying to train the horses. "Oh, horrible luck." "Oh, is that so?" Well, the next day, all of the young men in the village were destroyed in a battle, and only the old man's boy was saved because he couldn't go into war because he had a broken arm. And they were like, "Oh, what fortunate luck you have." And the old man said, "You want to make up your mind?" So I think about this because at one point this instrument was assigned a value. It was a modest value, I'm sure, at the time. It was brand new. It was shiny red. And some teenager or pre-teenager whose heart was set on playing music, when they received it, probably thought it was worth $1 million in their eyes. And then years progressed. They became older. Perhaps their interests changed. Perhaps it made its way under a bed or in a closet or in a basement. And at some point somebody had to clean it out, and they may have sold it at a yard sale or something like that, and they didn't put much of a value to it because it didn't have value anymore. And so all of a sudden, well, it's not worth much. But then time changes. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so as 60s era American made guitars increased in value, the really nice ones did, the more standard lines and substandard lines increased in value as well because it's got Kalamazoo mystique on it, right? Is that so? I'm going to keep asking that question. So anyway, I hope you found this entertaining. I hope you liked the stupid bass clips. My name's Jesse. I'll talk to you later.